Okay, we're back talking about the software lifecycle approaches, and so one of the problems with that trickle down, shift down policy is that somebody gets a new machine, and somebody else might get their leftover, and somebody else might get their leftover. That's an awful lot of work. Replacing one machine may mean a heck of a lot of work because you're actually replacing like 3 or 4. Okay, so formalizing a policy on page 163. That's probably the way to make sure that no one thinks there's favoritism going on. Go ahead and spell it out. Here's how we do this, and here's why. Obviously needs to be a written policy that everyone can look at, and keep it simple. It doesn't, one page is probably fine. These type, knowledge workers, I'm going to use that term, they get these machines fast. These guys get them a little slower. Okay. And then, of course, aligning with asset depreciation. There's a little talk in here about, some company that they just, on their depreciation table, they just listed the computer equipment, the same depreciation table as furniture. So, like 30 years or something. I mean, that's just ridiculous. Now, obviously, tax software that does this for a living, you have a category for those things, and it'll do the depreciation over 3 years or whatever your cycle you set it up for. Okay. So modern tax software has got that fixed. Case study. So, on page 163, they had a 20-year depreciation schedule. I mean, not a replacement schedule, but for tax purposes, for depreciation. And they changed it to 3-year. And they said, okay, we're going to do 1/3 of each of the batch of machines every year, right? 1/3 this year, 1/3 next year. It's very predictable and allows you to budget for it because you know exactly what you're going to get every single year. It's very particular. And they did quarterly updates. So they knew they were going to do 1/3 of the machines every year. But so now they're going to do, 1/12 of them in this quarter and 1/12 of them in that quarter, right? Okay. That kind of makes sense. And it allows the budget people to not go nuts because they know exactly how much money you're going to spend when you're going to spend it. Okay, good. So they talk about hidden network access controls. So on page 164, this is kind of a scary story. So let's say that you're swapping out a machine and you are completely unaware that this one piece of software is tagged to like the MAC address of this machine. It's a very specialized licensing agreement that's specific to that one piece of hardware. Okay, those things still exist, trust me. Or maybe it's a firewall rule that uses a MAC address, and so when you swap out a piece of equipment, whoa, I can't get to my stuff anymore, and you go, oh, hang on a second. So you kind of sort of need to remember, particularly swapping out hardware, which implies that the MAC address for your network card. I hope you guys know what I'm talking about on the MAC address, right? You've taken network courses, right? So the MAC address is going to change. So if you had a firewall rule or a software license agreement or something like that, if you had any machine-based certificates, let's say, for example, you had a piece of software, like, for example, the Son of Soup on Steroids guy, in order for it to talk to the server to dump this data, by the way, this is some sensitive data, right? Which machines don't have updates? A hacker would really like to know that, right? So we encrypt and have a certificate on the machine that encrypts the connection to the server. Okay, so a machine-based certificate would have to be regenerated. Maybe some new cabling requirements because you're going from 10 gigabit to 100, that kind of stuff. And perhaps there's no real, is there an opportunity to have an overlap, to have the old machine and the new machine up at the same time? Now, clearly they can't have the same name, right? But, can I leave them up or do I not have an overlap? What we did is we would swap them out. We would not have an overlap, but we would grab the hard drive from their old machine, put a sticky note on it for the date and time, and stick it on a shelf. And it stayed there for 30 days. That means if any time in 30 days you went, hey, no, wait a minute, I think I'm missing this one file. Now you told me to make sure I copied all of my files over, and I thought I did a good job, but I think I'm missing something. You go, hang on a second. You go grab their hard drive. Now it stays there for 30 days. That provides them ample time, in my opinion, to find out what they missed, and then you copy the file over and all the rest of that stuff. And after 30 days, when somebody needs a hard drive, you go to the cabinet, and grab the oldest one in the stack. This one's been here for 60 days. I'll grab that one, and that one becomes the, I'll wipe that one, and that becomes the operating system for the new install. Okay. So tiered support on page 165. So there's a really cool thing. They talked about the 30-minute rule for unsupported hardware. Let's say, for example, you brought in a label printer that you bought with your own money, and you installed it in your office for some reason. It's not something that the company did, and so it ain't working now. Maybe you upgraded the version 10, and maybe you can't find the version 10 drivers for it. And so, how much time should tech support spend on unauthorized hardware? Well, the 30-minute rule basically is one of those things where you tell them up front, look, I'll see what I can do, but I'm not going to spend like all day on this. Okay, there's a time limit, there's a budget. This is your piece of software. Your piece of hardware. Okay, so if you ask the customer up front, let's say you gave them 45 minutes. You say, okay, we have a 30-minute rule, but shh, don't tell anybody. I'm willing to spend 45 minutes on this. If I can get it to work, great. If not, at the end of 45 minutes, I'm going to leave. Is that okay? And almost everyone will say, yes, I agree to your terms. And in fact, some of them will say, thank you for giving me the extra 15 minutes. Okay? This is all psychology, right? You're telling them up front, this is unsupported, and I'll try my best. I'll give it best effort. But at the end of 45 minutes, I'm sorry, that's just not the way it works. So again, no need to explain, okay, it's been 45 minutes now. Don't do it at the end. Don't explain the rules at the end as you're getting ready to leave. Explain the rules at the beginning. Okay, Tier 1 support. That means everything is fully supported. Drivers and operating system and auto updates and, everything. That's just the normal thing that you would do. You're responsible for everything going on in the machine. Second tier is like the best effort kind of thing. Like, let's say somebody comes to you and they say, well, I just bought this new iPad and I'm having trouble getting onto the Microsoft Exchange. And it's like, I'll help you as much as I can, but I'll do my best. But no, this is not a fully supported thing. If you're not using Microsoft email to get to your Microsoft Exchange, that's kind of sort of on you. Okay. And then the ad hoc, which is basically no direct support at all. And the ad hoc would be like the bring your own device crowd. Like I brought my laptop in. And basically, the only support you would get from the bring your own device is how to connect to the network. It's almost always wireless. Most companies, if they have a BYOD, bring your own device policy, one of the policies is you don't jack directly into the wall with a cable. Okay, you use wireless only. Okay, and so the only support would be, can you connect? If you can connect, then you're on your own. Okay, and then the forbidden. These are the things that we will not allow anywhere. So, for example, an access point or a router. Don't ever. We're not going to allow you to plug in a wireless access point into the network or a router into the network or anything like that. Right. So things that are forbidden, not allowed. So that's basically not really a tier, though, is it? And then they talk about on 168 the idea of promoting an item to a higher tier. Well, lower number, but higher tier. You know what I'm talking about. So, for example, let's say you have a network device that, if misconfigured, could really cause chaos. And so, instead of saying, nah, go away, don't bother me, one of the lower tiers, maybe you ought to promote that to a fully managed, serviced, and supported thing, because of the risk of some idiot not knowing how to configure it and really messing things up on your network. So, you could tell them, hey, sure, you can use this, but we're not going to support you. And if that device or system or whatever it is starts, creating havoc, well, then you probably chose a poor choice. Okay. So on page 168, they talk about workstation as managed service. The idea is you could have like a leased machine. I don't mean leasing it from a company, but it's the same concept. It's basically a total package where you have the hardware and the operating system and the software and the updates and replacement and file services and backups and help desk and depot services for doing repairs. and they would pay on a monthly basis. So you would charge the accounting department, whatever, I'm going to make the numbers up, $100 a month for these machines, okay? And so that money goes back to the IT department they use to fund their salaries, okay? So sometimes billed as a monthly rate, it's basically a leased workstation. You're leasing it from your own company. Now, a lot of people don't like this because it's too expensive, but in reality, they're paying for it either way, or it's just a budget item. So the company is paying for it. It's just making the accounting department aware of the cost, right? The company has always been paying the salaries of the IT people. All you're doing is making them aware, okay? So, if you look at the big picture, you look at the whole productivity of your employees, having, if you went, no, $100 is way too much, we'll do this on our own. Don't do that, okay? If anyone says, screw it, we'll do it ourselves, then that's just going to cause problems. We're back to that tier 1, tier 2 kind of a thing. You don't want to have half your company on tier 1 and half your company on tier 2. That just doesn't make any sense. So, the managed service thing, the only place that really has a place is if you have basically no standards whatsoever. You have no policy at all to start with. This is a good way to start. Okay. So not in the book. All right. So when Patch Tuesday comes around and it says, okay, you need this update, how do you verify that it actually did? So one way would be to go here and look to see if the QFE is actually in the list, like this one. All right, whatever the heck that is it in the list, and when did it get patched? That'd be one way, okay? Looking to see if all the patches came out. So WUS, which we haven't talked about, Windows System Update Service, provides these patches to the machines in your network, okay? That way each machine doesn't have to go out to Microsoft to get the update. They can go local, saves an awful lot of network bandwidth, right? Okay. So it should show up in the update history, okay? But you really need to verify. Let me give you a crazy example. All right, 1 million years ago, we had a problem with this GDI32 graphics driver. And so, oops, we're vulnerable. We got a patch. We ran the patch. And then a month later, we installed a new piece of software. Okay, I don't know what it was. A new piece of software. And it overwrote that DLL. So even though in the machine, in the record, it says, yes, I installed this patch, that we were still vulnerable. So sometimes you have to go further. Sometimes you have to say, did you install the patch? And then, what is the version number of the absolute file? Yes. And in fact, one of the things we did is there's a thing here called file info, and I don't have anything in here, but you would set it up to go find this particular file. It'll tell you the version number and the size and the date, and you can instantly tell whether or not the patch maybe happened, but maybe you clobbered it sometime else. So verifying that this thing happened, verifying that the virus definitions, just because your machine is configured to automatically go get virus definitions, maybe there's something went wrong. Maybe you need to verify that. And once again, of course, this is not going to work for me because I'm not in a corporate environment, but it would tell you, the date and the user and the location and, all the stuff. Okay. Search for inappropriate software. Maybe you need to we had a list of software that we knew that people were kind of like. And so we would just run a query that says, hey, who's got anything weird that got installed? Yeah. Then some sort of centralized log for the database for all the event logs. Now, I don't have event logs turned on here because it's just too dang big. But I do have the event log settings that talk about, here's the application event log and all that. And so these would record into a central server, and you could hunt for things like, how about hunt for, gee, this hard drive is acting like it's getting ready to fail. Wouldn't that be kind of cool if you could use this to walk up to a customer and say, I understand your hard drive is about to fail. We need to schedule a replacement. And they go, what? Are you psychic? You go, yes, I am. Okay, kind of makes sense? All right, we are at the end of this chapter, and we'll see you guys again in the next chapter.